this is very basic, very fundamental, that the faithful should know what they believe, to know the content of the faith, both the ethos and the dogma.
Ethos και το δόγμα.
Because the ethics and the ethos are both essential for one to have piety, eusebia and evlavia.
Ευσέβεια και ευλάβεια είναι
Piety means having the proper ethos and dogma, which are irrevocably connected.
ένα.
If someone does not know, and of course we can't know everything, he needs to have a discerning spiritual father who has the discernment of the spirits to know what comes from where. What thought, logismos, comes from the evil one, and which comes from themselves, and which are of God, so that he can properly guide the believer.
Από τον Θεό.
And of course, to know what is sin and what is not sin, which unfortunately many faithful do not know. And therefore, they need to find a spiritual guide who knows all this. Therefore, this leads to a huge topic, which is called the choice of a proper spiritual guide. It's very important.
Το θέμα που
It's a very important issue that which I have touched upon in most of the talks I have given on the internet about how the Holy Fathers give us guidance in this.
έχω κάνει στο διαδίκτυο για αυτό το θέμα.
How the believer should make proper spiritual intercessions with zealous spiritual prayer, that God will show him a spiritual guide, and then to have the spiritual proper criteria in order to choose the right spiritual guide.
Κριτήρια σωστά, ώστε να
A basic criterion given by St. Simeon the New Theologian is that the spiritual father lives the apostolic life.
ο πνευματικός
The holy apostles, the disciples of our Christ, made up the first group, the first monastery on earth, we might say.
αποτέλεσαν θα λέγαμε
They lived the hesychastic life, hesychastically.
ομάδα όπως το
The Lord was in the place of the spiritual guide, the elder, we might say, and they, the members of the monastic community around the elder.
θα λέγαμε έτσι και αυτοί αποτελούσαν
They lived in obedience, in poverty, in continuous worship, and this life of the apostles was continued by the first Christians.
και τη ζωή των
For this reason,
οι πρώτοι χριστιανοί.
Father John Romanides of blessed memory said that the first name for the monastic life was the apostolic life.
Οι μόναχοι
Because the first monks cut themselves off from the parishes after the persecutions had ended. And since they wanted to live Christian lives and not be secularized, they went out into the desert,
οι πρώτες ενορίες.
from which came the first monasteries. So the first name for monastic life was the apostolic life, which is an imitation of the life of the apostles. And this life, the life of the apostles and the first Christians, is set down in Holy Scripture in the Acts of the Apostles.
Πρώτο χριστιανό είναι αποτυπωμένοι.
Now, a spiritual father must live this type of life. In other words, to live in poverty, free from the love of money, and in meekness. These are basic characteristics. And to have conquered anger. In other words, that is the passions and desires upon which are based fearful and fearsome passions.
Φοβερά πάντα.
We must have eliminated, as we say, these passions, anger, the love of money. And of course, he must lead a moral life, an ascetic life, to love silence, love living in solitude and love. These are basic criteria by which we may judge whom to choose as a proper spiritual father. Because not everybody who puts on a white coat is a good doctor. He might even be, forgive me, a butcher.
Να είναι και ένας, με συγχωρείτε, χασάπι.
And like we search for a good doctor, we don't just say it doesn't matter who you have as a doctor.
Ακριβώς.
And that's how we should search for the right spiritual father. And neither is it correct to say a priest said it, which I hear over and over from lay people. Which priest? Just because a priest said it, or a bishop told me, or which bishop? Or maybe even the synod said it. Because as we have said, there have been robbers' councils. The criterion is not that a priest said it, or a bishop, or even a synod, but that which was said is found in the scriptures, the canons, the fathers of the church, what is timeless throughout the 2,000-year history of the church. I believe that there must be many converts who understand this very well, because they searched among the heterodox for some years, reading a great many books, just so that they could arrive at the Orthodox faith. They have experienced with great difficulty that the criteria are very important. The correct faith, the correct life. They might come and say, that's well and good, but we live far away from monasteries, or we live in a city where, unfortunately, there is little true Orthodox spiritual life. What can we do? What can we do since we have no access to a spiritual father? Is it preferable for them once a year to go by plane to the other end of America or the other end of Australia or wherever they might be, so that even in this way they might have a spiritual father so that they confess? In other words, is it practical to do that? How can they struggle with this? Because there are few ascetics. We should choose, we should find him, because that of itself is a difficulty in our days. And having found him, then certainly we should travel miles, many miles, to go to make confession to him. Now, for sure, from what I know, by economia, and when there is great need, this can take place with the means we have today, contemporary means, by the telephone or the message or whatnot. We can ask God, because the grace of God is not limited by distances, as St. Porphyrius says. And from what I know, St. Porphyrius did this. He would confess people by telephone. And he had a very good telephone for his time, and he spoke with everyone and helped many people this way. But to go physically, to make the effort, has been told to us by St. Cosmas at Delos, who said, there will come a time when you will have to travel miles, hundreds of miles, just to find a priest. What does this mean? That there will be no priests? There will be priests, but they won't be true, proper priests. They won't be able to heal you. And that is the great problem, for when the priest himself does not live the apostolic life, in other words, ascetically, hesychastically, with fasting, with struggle against the passions, he cannot heal you. Because he will make his own passions allowable, lawful to others, to his spiritual children. He will say it doesn't matter. He will not give the proper guidance, as he himself will not have lived the therapeutic path.